The smell of roasted coffee and warm bread drifted through the morning air as Mark Miller stepped out of his black SUV and looked up at the shining glass facade of Harvest Deli and Grill, one of the hundreds of restaurants he owned across the United States. The place was already humming, early customers chatting, deliveries arriving, cooks shouting in rhythm behind the kitchen door. He smiled to himself. This was his favorite part, the ground floor of life, where money meant nothing and manners meant everything. Every few weeks he did this, took off the tailored suit, wore the apron, became invisible. Nobody recognized him without the sharp haircut and the navy tie. In jeans, an old cap, and a plain uniform, he looked like any other middle-aged worker trying to make rent. That anonymity was priceless. It reminded him who he was before the billion-dollar boardrooms, before Forbes covers and charity galas, the boy who washed dishes for $5.25 an hour in a diner his mother managed. He pushed through the back door, greeted by the hiss of the grill and the steam that always fogged his glasses. "Morning, Mark," shouted Liam Rivera, the young manager barely past 30. "You're early." "Couldn't sleep," Mark said, tying the apron. "Thought I'd earn my breakfast." Liam grinned. "You sure you don't want to run the place instead?" Mark chuckled. "Maybe later. Today I'm just the help." He liked Liam. The kid reminded him of himself, polite, honest, the kind who said, "Sir," without irony. The lunch rush hadn't started yet, so Mark spent the first hour wiping tables and chatting with the cooks. He learned that one's mother was sick, another's son just made honor roll. Those conversations mattered to him more than any quarterly report. At 11:30, the doorbell chimed. The midday crowd began trickling in, office workers, tourists, two older women arguing about calories, and then she walked in. Sarah McCann. He recognized the name before the face. Everyone in the food service industry knew her, the fierce, glamorous CEO of McCann Foods Group, a rival corporation famous for its aggressive marketing and even more aggressive leadership. She was dressed like a magazine cover, cream blazer, gold jewelry that caught the light, red lipstick sharp as armor. A pair of men trailed her, investment partners, judging by the watches and the way they let her walk a step ahead. The hostess guided them to a corner booth near the window. Mark, carrying menus, froze for half a second before steadying himself. "Table 12, Liam said. "You got it?" He nodded. "Yeah, I've got it." He walked over, professional, calm. "Good afternoon," he said with the practiced warmth of any good waiter. "Welcome to Harvest Deli and Grill. My name's Mark. Can I start you off with drinks?" Sarah didn't look up from her phone. "Sparkling water." "No ice." One of the investors ordered coffee. The other nodded to whatever she said. Mark wrote it down, though he didn't need to. When he returned with their drinks, she finally looked at him, not at his eyes, but at his name tag. Her brow furrowed slightly, like she was inspecting a stain. "This water isn't cold," she said flatly. "It's room temperature, ma'am." "You asked for no ice." She sighed as though he'd failed a test. "Then maybe chill the bottle next time before serving." "Common sense." Mark smiled politely. "Of course." He set down their plates 20 minutes later. Salmon salad, avocado toast, truffle fries, everything perfect. But perfection wasn't what she wanted, control was. "Excuse me," she snapped, waving him over. "This dressing isn't the same as last time. That's our lemon herb vinaigrette. We haven't changed the recipe." She tasted it again, exaggeratedly. "It's watery. Did you even shake it before pouring?" "I'll replace it right away," he said evenly. The investors exchanged awkward glances. One of them whispered, "It's fine, Sarah," but she ignored him. As Mark walked back to the kitchen, he heard her voice rise behind him. "Some people should find another line of work." Liam met him halfway. "Everything okay?" Mark gave a small shrug. "Just another customer," but it wasn't. Not for him. Something about the way she spoke, not just rudeness, But the assumption that everyone else existed to orbit her hit a nerve he thought long buried. He remembered being 19, holding a busboy tray while a banker in a suit complained that his soup was too emotional. The memory still stung. He brought back a new salad, fresh dressing, every detail flawless. When he set it down, Sarah looked up just long enough to say, "About time," and returned to her conversation. He nodded politely, stepped back, and continued serving other tables. 20 minutes later, he noticed 2 college students in the next booth filming discreetly with their phones. He didn't think much of it until Sarah's voice cut through the dining room again. "Excuse me, are you deaf or just slow?" The room went silent. She was holding up a napkin, spotless except for a tiny dot of dressing. "Do you see this? What kind of establishment hires people who can't even clean a table?" Liam started toward her, but Mark lifted a hand. "It's okay," he murmured. He walked over, calm, eyes steady. "I'm sorry you had a bad experience," he said quietly. Sarah crossed her arms. "Don't patronize me. I run 22 restaurants myself. If this is how your staff operates, no wonder customers leave." He inclined his head slightly. "Thank you for the feedback." "Feedback?" She scoffed. "It's advice. Learn some professionalism." Every eye in the room was on them. The phones kept recording. Mark just smiled faintly, took the napkin, and said, "You're absolutely right, ma'am. I'll remember that." Then he turned and walked away. The moment was over in seconds, but it lingered like smoke. Liam came up beside him near the counter. "She's unbelievable. Want me to ask her to leave?" Mark shook his head. "No, let her finish. She's paying customer." "You sure?" "That video's already on someone's TikTok." He exhaled slowly. "It's fine. Let the internet decide who's who." He finished his shift quietly. When Sarah left, she didn't even glance back. The investors apologized on her behalf, but he simply nodded. By the time he changed out of uniform, the clip had already hit 1,000 views. A short video titled, "Corporate Karen Destroys Waiter for Existing." He watched it once, expression unreadable. The comments poured in fast. Who talks to people like that? The waiter handled it like a saint. Imagine treating workers this way in 2025. He closed the app, tucked his phone away, and smiled faintly. By morning, it had over 1 million. At sunrise, Mark sat in his penthouse office overlooking downtown LA, wearing the same suit that once intimidated billion-dollar investors. His assistant entered quietly, tablet in hand. "Mr. Miller, the clip from yesterday's restaurant is trending everywhere. People are trying to find out who the waiter was. Should we issue a statement?" He looked up from his coffee. "No, sir, they're connecting it to Harvest Deli and Grill. Some are asking if it's our employee." Mark smiled. "Let them ask." The assistant hesitated. "She, the woman in the video, is Sarah McCann, the CEO of McCann Foods. I know. You know her? Met her once years ago," he said. "She gave a talk at an investor summit about efficiency and image. Spent 20 minutes explaining how empathy slows down productivity." The assistant grimaced. "Should we?" "No statements." "No leaks," Mark said firmly. "The internet doesn't need my help to deliver consequences." He turned his chair toward the window, watching sunlight glint off skyscrapers. Somewhere down there, Sarah McCann was probably waking to a nightmare of her own creation. He didn't feel anger, only a distant sadness. People like her reminded him how easily success rotted character when gratitude disappeared. He whispered to himself, "Power without humility always collapses." Meanwhile, across the city, Sarah McCann's phone wouldn't stop vibrating. She woke up to hundreds of missed calls, thousands of notifications. Her PR director's name flashed repeatedly. She finally answered, voice hoarse. "What is it?" "Have you seen it?" the woman shouted. "The video? You're trending on every platform." Sarah sat up confused. "What video?" "The one from yesterday, the waiter incident." People are calling for your resignation." "What?" Her assistant burst into the room holding an iPad. The screen showed the clip, her face, twisted with disdain, the waiter's calm response, the caption, "KEO humiliates worker. He handles it like a saint." Sarah's blood ran cold. "This is ridiculous," she snapped. "It's out of context." "Context doesn't matter," her PR head said. "The board's demanding an emergency meeting. I'm the board." "Not anymore," the woman replied quietly. "Investors are furious. This could cost millions." Sarah ended the call and threw the phone on the bed. For the first time in years, she felt something foreign, fear. She walked to the mirror. The woman staring back at her looked the same, flawless makeup, perfect hair, but her eyes were different now, smaller, unsure. She muttered to her reflection, "They'll forget by tomorrow." They always do. But deep down, she knew they wouldn't. Some storms don't pass. They change the landscape forever. By the end of the week, the scandal dominated headlines. Sarah canceled appearances, fired her PR team, blamed digital manipulation. None of it worked. Sponsors dropped partnerships. Her employees whispered in hallways. Anonymous letters appeared in her inbox, stories from ex-staff about similar treatment. Her empire was cracking from the inside. And somewhere above it all, Mark Miller watched in silence, neither gloating nor intervening, the calm eye of the storm she had summoned herself. He didn't want her ruined. He wanted her to see. He knew the lesson was coming. Because arrogance always writes its own downfall, and humility always waits to collect it. The week that followed was the longest of Sarah McCann's life. Her face was everywhere, frozen mid-sneer on every platform, shared by strangers dissecting her arrogance frame by frame. Talk shows replayed the clip with mocking commentary. Headlines screamed, "Corporate CEO berates waiter. Internet demands consequences." Her PR team scrambled like firefighters in a hurricane. Press releases, apologies drafted and retracted. Every attempt only fueled the outrage. Someone dug up old employee reviews describing her temper, her micromanagement, her cruel professionalism. The internet assembled the puzzle faster than she could destroy the pieces. In 48 hours, she'd gone from boardroom idol to public villain. By Thursday, she'd stopped leaving the house. The shades stayed drawn, the phone turned off. Reporters camped outside her driveway, microphones waiting for blood. Inside, her reflection stared back from every dark surface, the perfect face of control now trembling under mascara and fear. She'd built her entire identity around being untouchable. And now, the whole world was touching her, clawing, judging, laughing. Her assistant Amelia Ross was the only one brave enough to show up. She found Sarah sitting on the couch surrounded by half-eaten takeout containers and unopened mail. "Ma'am," Amelia began softly, "the board has called an emergency meeting tomorrow morning." Sarah didn't look up. "Tell them I'm sick. They said if you don't come, they'll move forward without you." Silence. Sarah closed her eyes, head falling into her hands. "They can't fire me. I built this company." Amelia hesitated, then said the words anyway. "Technically, you merged into it." "They can." For a long time, neither spoke. The only sound was the steady hum of the refrigerator and the faint echo of her own breathing, shallow, uneven, afraid. The next morning, Sarah arrived at headquarters disguised in plain clothes, sunglasses, hair tied back. She used the side entrance to avoid the press. Inside the conference room, the air was already thick with tension. 12 people sat around the table, board members, legal counsel, PR directors. Her chair at the head of the table was empty. She took it anyway. One of the older board members, Charles Dean, cleared his throat. "Sarah, the video caused significant damage to the brand. We lost 3 major sponsors, and our stock dipped 9%. That's temporary," she said, forcing her voice steady. "People forget fast." Charles frowned. "They haven't forgotten." They've organized. He slid a folder across the table, screenshots of petitions, headlines, angry tweets. Sarah skimmed them, her eyes scanning lines like "boycott McCann Foods" and "arrogance is not leadership." "Public relations can't save this," another member said. "We need to show accountability." Sarah clenched her jaw. "Meaning what?" "Step down, temporarily," Charles said. "A public hiatus. 6 months, maybe a year." "I'm not stepping down. This isn't optional." She slammed her hand on the table. "I said no." The room fell silent. For the first time, she saw no fear in their faces, only fatigue. Charles removed his glasses and looked at her kindly, almost sadly. "Sarah, leadership isn't about control. It's about trust. And you've lost it." She sat back, breath shaking. Outside the glass wall, she could see the company logo, McCann Foods Group, gleaming in stainless steel. For years it had been her crown. Now it looked like a mirror she couldn't stand to face. "Fine," she said quietly. "Do what you have to." She stood, grabbed her purse, and walked out before they could see the tears. Across town, Mark Miller watched the same news on a muted TV inside his office. His assistant had left the morning briefing documents on his desk, but he hadn't touched them. He wasn't sure what he felt. Sympathy wasn't quite the word. Neither was satisfaction. What stirred inside him was something quieter, more complicated, the knowledge that justice had arrived without his hand guiding it. He turned off the screen. "Let her have space," he murmured. He thought of his mother, Ellen Miller, who used to say, "Life always balances its own books. You just have to stay solvent long enough to see it." He leaned back in his chair, remembering that phrase, and smiled faintly. A month passed. Then 2. Sarah's world shrank to the walls of her apartment. Former colleagues stopped calling. Friends ghosted her. Even her social media accounts, once filled with photos of champagne lunches and motivational quotes, now lay dormant, monuments to a persona that no longer existed. She spent her days reading comment sections, convincing herself it wasn't her fault. They twisted it. It was edited. People hate women in power. But late at night, when exhaustion dulled her defenses, she'd replay the video silently and watch herself, the sneer, the impatience, the way her eyes dismissed the man holding the napkin. And for a moment, shame would crack through the armor. Who was that woman? She didn't even recognize her. In those same months, Harvest Global Brands expanded quietly. Under Mark's guidance, they acquired several struggling franchises, including a small but growing chain once partnered with McCann Foods Group. The deal was discreet, clean, and perfectly timed. By summer, Mark's holdings had increased by nearly 40%. Investors whispered that he was preparing for something big, a merger that would reshape the entire fast food industry. He said nothing publicly, but the plan was already in motion. He'd never meant to cross paths with Sarah again. But the universe, or perhaps karma, seemed intent on symmetry. One evening, Mark visited the same restaurant where it had all started. The decor hadn't changed: warm lights, polished wood, soft jazz humming through the speakers. But the energy felt different now. Liam greeted him at the door. "Didn't expect to see you back so soon, sir. Just needed a reminder," Mark said, smiling. "How's business?" "Good. Ever since the video, people treat the staff better. Tips doubled." Mark laughed softly. "Maybe that's the only good side of viral outrage." Liam hesitated. "You know, people online are still trying to find out who you were, the waiter. Nobody's figured it out. Let's keep it that way. You're sure?" "I'm sure," Mark said. Some lessons work best without an audience. He took a quiet corner table and watched the room. Couples talking. Workers laughing. Life humming along. He felt something close to peace. Then his phone buzzed. A single message from his financial advisor. McCann Foods board approved the merger. "Papers in motion. You're the new majority stakeholder once it closes." He stared at the screen for a long time, expression unreadable. Fate, it seemed, had a sense of humor. By autumn, the headlines had changed again. Harvest Global acquires McCann Foods in multi-billion-dollar deal. Mark Miller expands empire into 22 new markets. Sarah read the article twice, sitting in her small rented apartment. Her name wasn't even mentioned in the press release. She'd gone from CEO to a footnote. But what made her chest tighten wasn't the acquisition. It was the name, Harvest Global. She whispered it aloud, trying to place it. It sounded familiar. Then she remembered the waiter's uniform, the tiny logo embroidered above the pocket. Harvest Deli and Grill. Her breath caught. No, she whispered. It can't be. She opened her laptop and searched Harvest Global Brands, CEO. The first image that appeared nearly stopped her heart. Mark Miller. She leaned back, staring at the screen, replaying the moment in the restaurant, the calm eyes, the quiet dignity. The man she'd humiliated. The man she'd dismissed as nothing. He was the one. The room seemed to tilt. She closed her eyes, pressing a hand to her mouth. Oh my God. Days later, her phone rang. Unknown number. Ms. McCann? Yes. This is Eleanor Briggs, executive assistant to MR, Mark Miller. He'd like you to attend a meeting tomorrow morning regarding your position within the newly merged company. My position? Yes, ma'am. 10 o'clock sharp. Headquarters, Century City. Sarah hesitated. Is he going to be there? Yes, Eleanor said. He insisted. She didn't sleep that night. By dawn, she'd changed outfits 5 times before settling on a simple navy suit, the first thing she'd worn in months that wasn't designed to impress anyone. She drove in silence, hands trembling on the steering wheel. The lobby of Harvest Global was everything her life used to be. Clean lines, glass, wealth that didn't need to shout. The receptionist greeted her kindly, offered coffee. She refused. Her throat was too dry to swallow. When the elevator doors opened, the boardroom stretched before her, long oak table, floor-to-ceiling windows pouring in light. At the head sat Mark Miller. He looked the same as he had that day, calm, poised, except now there was no apron. Only a navy suit, tailored perfectly. Ms. McCann, he said, standing. Thank you for coming, her voice wavered. Miller, I didn't realize that I was the waiter? She swallowed. Yes, he gestured for her to sit. Please, she obeyed. The other executives watched in uneasy silence. Mark clasped his hands on the table. I didn't call you here to humiliate you, Sarah. The internet already handled that part. She flinched. I called you here because I believe in second chances, he continued. But they only mean something if you understand the first mistake. She nodded, eyes wet. I do. I was awful. I thought power made me someone. I forgot what it's for. He studied her face for a moment, then said softly, Power reveals character. Always has. I don't expect forgiveness, she whispered. I already forgave you, he said. The day it happened. Her head lifted, eyes widening. You didn't hurt me, Miss McCann, he said. You only revealed yourself. Tears slipped down her cheeks. What happens now? He leaned back, tone steady but kind. You'll stay with the company, but not as an executive. You'll be reassigned to our operations division. Field training, direct store management. I think it's time you see what real leadership looks like. She nodded, unable to speak. He rose, signaling the meeting's end. You start Monday. When she left the building, the sunlight felt too bright. But for the first time in months, it didn't burn. It warmed. As she stepped into the street, she glanced up at the mirrored windows reflecting the sky. For years she'd looked at her reflection and seen superiority. Now, for the first time, she saw a student. Inside, Mark watched her car pull away from the window of his office. Liam entered a moment later with a file. Everything handled, sir. Handled, Mark said quietly. You're really giving her another shot? Mark smiled faintly. Everyone deserves one. Besides, humility taught properly lasts longer than punishment. Liam nodded slowly. Guess you'd know. I do, Mark said, turning back toward the city skyline. Because once, someone gave me one too. The view outside shimmered with sunlight, 1,000 reflections on 1,000 windows. Somewhere out there, he hoped Sarah McCann would finally learn what power was meant to build, not break. And for the first time since that humiliating afternoon, he felt the balance settle perfectly in his chest. The first day back on a restaurant floor felt like punishment. Sarah McCann stood in the narrow break room of a Harvest Deli and Grill outlet in Pasadena, wearing the same black uniform she'd once criticized for being too pedestrian. The name tag white plastic. Black letters read simply, Sarah, nothing more. Liam Rivera, now a regional manager, greeted her with a calm professionalism that made her uncomfortable. Welcome aboard, he said, handing her a clipboard. We'll start with basic service flow, cleaning, inventory. You'll shadow me for the week. Sarah nodded stiffly. Of course, she could feel the stares of the younger staff. Some recognized her from the viral video. Others just sensed the tension that clung to her like perfume. One whispered, "Is that really her?" Another murmured, "She used to run McCann Foods, right?" She kept her chin high. Let's get to work. By noon, her hands smelled like coffee grounds and sanitizer. She'd wiped tables, restocked napkins, and fumbled with the touchscreen register. The work was relentless, nothing like the curated chaos of an executive office. Every motion mattered. Every mistake showed. At one point, a customer complained about a missing side order. Sarah rushed to fix it, only to drop the tray. The crash echoed through the dining room. Plates shattered. Conversations paused. Liam appeared beside her, kneeling to help pick up the pieces. He didn't scold her. He just said, quietly, "Happens to everyone. The trick is not to look down longer than you have to." His kindness hit harder than any humiliation. That night, she drove home with aching feet and trembling fingers. For the first time in years, she felt the full weight of effort, the kind that doesn't come with applause or stock options. By the end of the first week, something inside her had shifted. She began noticing things she'd never seen before. The way waiters read a room like detectives, the silent teamwork between cooks, the grace it took to stay polite when exhaustion screamed otherwise. She learned to anticipate needs, to refill water before being asked, to greet regulars by name. Slowly, the staff stopped avoiding her. One afternoon, a new employee, Rosa, spilled soup all over the counter. Her eyes filled with panic. Sarah, without thinking, grabbed towels and helped her clean up. "It's fine," Sarah said gently. "Happens to the best of us." Rosa blinked. "You're being nice?" Sarah laughed softly. "I'm trying something new." The staff started smiling at her after that. Weeks turned into months. Sarah rotated through kitchens, warehouses, and training centers across the state. The work was humbling, but oddly freeing. Without titles or cameras, she discovered a rhythm of living she'd forgotten, honest, direct, human. She met people who changed her perspective completely. There was Marco, a single father saving for his daughter's college tuition. Tina, a manager who'd once lived in her car. Louise, an immigrant who sent half his paycheck home every month. Each story chipped away at her old arrogance. One night, over after-shift coffee, Tina asked, "You ever work in places like this before?" Sarah hesitated. "No, I used to think people like you worked for me." Tina raised an eyebrow. "And now?" "Now I think I worked for the wrong reasons," Tina smiled. "Then maybe you're finally getting promoted to human." They laughed, and for the first time in years, Sarah didn't feel like she had to prove anything. Meanwhile, Mark Miller received periodic reports about her progress. Liam sent updates, short, factual notes. "She's adapting well. She doesn't complain." Staff seemed to respect her now. Mark read each one in silence. He hadn't spoken to Sarah since that day in the boardroom. He didn't need to. Some lessons grew best without supervision. Still, on certain evenings when he visited local franchises incognito, he found himself wondering how she was doing, not as a CEO, but as a person rediscovering the ground beneath her. By spring, Sarah had become a fixture of the Pasadena store. Customers greeted her warmly. Co-workers relied on her. She'd even begun mentoring new hires, teaching them patience, gratitude, and how to apologize when things went wrong. One evening, a wealthy customer in a tailored suit snapped his fingers for service. "Hey, waitress, over here." The tone was sharp, dismissive. Sarah froze. The memory of her own arrogance flashed like lightning. She walked over calmly. "Good evening, sir. How can I help you?" "This sandwich is cold," he said, glaring. "Do you people even check before serving food?" Behind her, Rosa flinched, whispering, "I made that one." Sarah turned to the man. "I'm sorry for the inconvenience," she said. "We'll replace it immediately," he smirked. "Yeah, you'd better. Maybe if you worked harder." Sarah cut him off politely, firmly. "Sir, we'll handle this right away. But I'll ask you to speak respectfully to my team." The table went quiet. He blinked, then muttered, "Fine," and looked away. Sarah returned to the kitchen, replaced the sandwich herself, and handed it back with a smile that was calm and steady. Rosa watched her, awe in her eyes. Later, Rosa whispered, "You didn't even yell. You were like, peaceful." Sarah smiled. Anger doesn't feed anyone. Dignity does. That night, driving home, she realized she'd just become the person she used to humiliate, and it felt right. She thought about Mark Miller, his patience, his quiet eyes, the way he'd stood there while she tore him down. She wondered how many times he'd done that for others, absorbed cruelty instead of returning it. She whispered to the empty car, "Thank you." Months later, a letter arrived addressed to Sarah McCann, Pasadena branch. Inside was a single line typed on elegant stationery. "Humility grows best under pressure. Keep watering it. No signature needed." Sarah smiled, folded the note carefully, and tucked it into her wallet. By the end of the year, she'd earned a regional training certification and a quiet reputation as one of the company's most empathetic managers. Employees trusted her. Customers loved her. Her old corporate peers barely recognized her name anymore, and she preferred it that way. She'd stopped wearing luxury labels, started reading again, volunteered on weekends at a community kitchen. The woman who once saw worth only in profit now found it in service. One late afternoon, as she was closing the restaurant, Liam received a call from headquarters. He hung up and turned to her with a small smile. "Mark Miller wants to see you," he said. "Tomorrow, corporate offices." Sarah's stomach tightened. "Am I in trouble?" Liam chuckled. "Not this time." She barely slept. The next morning, she arrived at the sleek Century City building, polished glass, sunlight streaming across marble floors. She hadn't been here since her humiliation. The elevator ride felt endless. When the doors opened, she found Mark waiting in the lobby. No assistants, no board members, just him in a simple gray suit, holding 2 coffees. "Good morning, Miss McCann," he said, smiling warmly. "Good morning." "Sir," he handed her a cup. "Hazelnut latte, right? You used to order it everywhere." Her eyes widened. "You remember?" "I remember everything," he said softly. "Come on. Let's take a walk." They stepped out onto the rooftop terrace. From up there, Los Angeles looked endless, streets glimmering like veins of light, the ocean a faint blue smear on the horizon. For a while, neither spoke. Finally, Mark said, "I've been watching your progress. You've done good work." Sarah exhaled, the words hitting deeper than she expected. "Thank you. I just wanted to make things right." "You did more than that," he said. "You changed." She looked out at the skyline. "I used to think success was about control. But it's really about connection, isn't it?" Mark nodded. connection, and consistency. Anyone can be kind once. Real strength is being kind every day. She smiled faintly. Is this forgiveness? I forgave you a long time ago, he said. But this is recognition. Tears shimmered in her eyes. I don't deserve it. Maybe not then, he said gently. But now you've earned it. The sun dipped lower, painting the city gold. Mark set his cup down and looked at her. We're expanding the foundation next quarter. A leadership program for underprivileged youth. I'd like you to run it. Sarah blinked. Me? You've seen both sides of power. That's the perspective we need. For a long moment, she couldn't speak. Then she nodded slowly. I'll do it, he smiled. Good. Then welcome back to something real this time. When she drove home that evening, the city lights blurred through her tears. Not sadness, just the strange, fragile joy of renewal. She parked outside her apartment and sat for a while, watching people walk dogs, carry groceries, laugh, ordinary life. Once, she would have overlooked it. Now it felt sacred. She whispered to herself, he was right. Humility grows best under pressure. And for the first time since the fall, she felt light enough to breathe freely again. The following year, the rooftop of the Century Plaza Hotel shimmered beneath 1,000 golden lights. The air was warm, the city stretched endless and alive below, and a banner hung above the entrance, the Harvest Foundation Annual Gala, empowering the hands that feed the world. Sarah stood near the entrance in a simple, elegant black dress. Nothing extravagant. The fabric flowed softly to her ankles, her hair tied in a loose bun. She held a glass of sparkling water, feeling both nervous and grounded, like someone returning home after a very long journey. She was no longer the woman who strutted through power. Her steps were slower, steadier, more deliberate. Every movement carried memory. Every breath carried grace. The last 12 months had transformed her in ways no corporate seminar ever could. As director of Harvest Foundation's leadership program, she now oversaw training centers across the country. The initiative gave scholarships to young people who dreamed of entrepreneurship but lacked opportunity, especially those who, like her former employees, came from humble beginnings. She'd visited over 50 community sites, shaking hands with cooks, cleaners, and cashiers, the invisible backbone of an industry she'd once exploited. Each story reminded her that dignity wasn't given by title, it was created by work. Tonight was a celebration of them, not her. But she still felt nervous, because somewhere in the crowd was Mark Miller. The ballroom glowed with soft jazz, glasses clinking, the scent of citrus and candle wax drifting in the air. At every table sat people whose lives had changed because of Harvest Global. Scholarship recipients, small business owners, franchise employees turned mentors. Sarah smiled as she recognized faces she'd trained. Rosa, the shy waitress from Pasadena, now led a team of 20. Tina, once homeless, now owned her own cafe. Marco's daughter had just started college on a full scholarship. They spotted Sarah across the room and waved. She waved back, heart swelling. When the lights dimmed, an announcer's voice filled the room. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the founder of Harvest Global Brands and our host tonight, Mr. Mark Miller. Applause rippled through the hall as Mark stepped on stage in a crisp black suit, no tie, calm and warm as ever. Good evening, everyone, he began, voice carrying quiet authority. A year ago, we launched the Harvest Foundation with one belief: that opportunity shouldn't depend on where you start, but on how willing you are to grow. He paused, scanning the crowd. Tonight, we celebrate not profit, but progress, the kind that multiplies when we choose humility over ego and service over status. The audience applauded softly, the kind of applause that comes from respect, not obligation. Sarah listened from her table, her eyes shining. Later, when the music returned and conversation flowed again, Mark moved through the crowd with that same quiet ease he remembered from their rooftop talk months ago. He stopped to greet scholarship winners, shake hands, thank donors. When he finally reached her table, Sarah stood. Miller, she said with a smile. You clean up well, he laughed. So do you. It's good to see you, Sarah. Congratulations on the program, she said. You've built something beautiful. You've built it, he corrected gently. I just gave it a roof. She looked around at the people dancing, the waiters serving hors d'oeuvres, the laughter echoing through the hall. It doesn't feel like the corporate world anymore. That's the point, Mark said. We're trying to make business feel human again. They stood in silence for a moment, watching Rosa twirl across the dance floor with her boyfriend. She's come a long way, Sarah murmured. So have you, Mark replied. A journalist approached, smiling politely. Miller, Miss McCann, may I get a quote? People love your story. From rivals to collaborators, it's almost poetic. Mark chuckled. Maybe one day she'll write the book, Sarah smiled. Only if he promises to proofread. The journalist laughed, took the photo, and disappeared into the crowd. Mark turned to her. Do you ever miss it? Miss what? The power. The attention. The noise. She thought about it for a moment. Sometimes I miss feeling seen. But I don't miss who I had to be to get it. He nodded slowly. That's the hardest thing to let go of. The version of ourselves that succeeded for the wrong reasons. She met his gaze. You seem to have figured that out a long time ago. He smiled faintly. I've just had more practice falling. The night deepened. After the final toast, when guests began drifting out and the band packed up, Sarah found herself alone on the terrace again. The city glittered below, the same view she'd once stared at from her office, but it felt entirely different now. Back then, every light had looked like competition. Tonight it looked like possibility. She heard footsteps behind her. Mark joined her at the railing, 2 glasses of water in hand. You disappeared, he said softly. I was just thinking. Dangerous habit, she smiled. It's safer than arrogance, he laughed quietly. They stood side by side, silent for a long moment. Then she said, You could have destroyed me, Mark, and no one would have blamed you. I know, but you didn't. Why? He looked out at the skyline. Because revenge doesn't restore anything. It only continues the cycle. She studied his profile, the way the city lights reflected in his eyes. You're not like anyone I've ever met, he shrugged. I just believe in balance. Life gives you what you need to learn, not what you want to keep. Sarah exhaled slowly. You taught me more with silence than any words ever could. And you taught me something too, he said. That even the proud can change when they're given a reason to rise. She smiled, faint tears glinting under the warm glow of the terrace lights. I used to think grace was weakness. Now I know it's the strongest thing there is. He raised his glass slightly. To grace then. She clinked hers against his. And to second chances. Months later, the Harvest Foundation opened its largest training center in Chicago. A gleaming building made of glass and light, with the words, Service is Strength, carved above the entrance. Sarah stood at the ribbon-cutting ceremony, surrounded by dozens of young trainees. Many of them came from backgrounds she'd once dismissed, kids from working-class neighborhoods, single parents, immigrants. In her speech, she said simply, Success isn't what you own. It's who you uplift. The crowd applauded, but she didn't seek applause anymore. What mattered was watching the faces of those who now believed in themselves, because someone finally believed in them first. That evening, as she locked up the new facility, she noticed an envelope taped to the glass door. No address, no sender, just her name. Inside was a single note written in Mark's neat handwriting. Arrogance built an empire. Humility built a legacy. You chose the right one, Sarah smiled, holding the paper to her chest. The sky above Chicago glowed orange as the sun set behind the skyline. Somewhere in another city, Mark Miller was probably sitting in a quiet diner, talking with the staff, asking about their kids, blending into the ordinary world he'd never stopped honoring. And she, once the woman who measured worth in dollars, now measured it in lives changed. A year later, at the next gala, the stage lights reflected off the silver award in her hands, the Harvest Humanitarian of the Year. She turned to Mark, who stood beside her, applause echoing through the room. "You did this," she whispered. He shook his head. "No, Sarah, you did." She smiled through tears. "Then maybe I finally earned my seat at the table." Mark leaned in slightly, voice calm but proud. "You always had it. You just had to stop standing on it." The audience laughed softly, unaware of the deeper truth behind the joke. Sarah looked out over the sea of faces, hundreds of workers, students, dreamers, and felt something she hadn't in years: peace. Later that night, when the gala ended and the lights dimmed, she lingered in the empty hall. On a whim, she walked toward the catering staff, who were cleaning up plates and wiping tables. "Thank you," she said sincerely, "for everything tonight." One of the young waiters smiled awkwardly. "It's just our job, ma'am." She shook her head. "No, it's the foundation of everything we celebrate here." He blinked, surprised. She helped them stack chairs, laughing softly as they teased her about working on her night off. As she carried a tray to the kitchen, a quiet realization settled in. The circle was complete. The humiliated had become humble. The powerful had become human. And for the first time, her success finally meant something. The end. For reflection. In the end, it wasn't the billions that built Mark Miller's empire. It was the grace to forgive. And it wasn't the scandal that transformed Sarah McCann. It was the courage to serve.